Welcome back to my kitchen. I am really into preserving the magic of summer, if you haven't figured that out. And one of my favorite things is basil. It's one of my favorite herbs. You can't have summer without basil. Now, we're going to make pesto because that is just the way, that is the premier way to preserve that fresh, wonderful something that's in basil. But I want to show you something. This is really important. When you're making basil, now I'm assuming that you have basil, if you're considering making pesto, I assume you have basil growing in your garden. You want to use basil that does not have seed heads on it or flowering at all. This is a little bit wilted. I pick my herbs in the morning early when the oil is up, and that's wilted a little bit. This is still water. This has not had a flower head on it. Actually, I keep my basil cut back so that I do have some tender, sweet sprigs like this. For pesto, you're going to pull those leaves off and just use the leaves. If you have something like this, you can get some fairly good basil flavor in your pesto, but it's not going to be that sweet, bright, wonderful something that you really want to capture. My brother made pesto not long ago, and he says, you know, I really was just so disappointed in it. And when I went out and visited his garden and saw his basil plants, I realized what the problem was. I said, cut those things back. We just put just the leaves. Now, basil has flavor in the leaves and the stems, but for pesto, you want just the leaves. They're tender, they're sweet. We have grated Romano here. What we have is about 3 cups of leaves, loosely packed. We have about 3/4 of a cup of Romano cheese, about 3/4 of a cup of a good quality extra virgin olive oil. Let that just run down in there. We don't want to lose any of that. 3 cloves of garlic. One of these is pretty big, but we like garlic on everything, a lot of garlic. And we have some walnuts. Now, you could use walnuts or you could use pine nuts. But we're using walnuts because we have a walnut crop that is local to us and they're easy to get. We know they're good and healthy. I'm going to turn this on. We're going to puree it. We're going to turn it into paste. With the magic of video editing, I spared you all the noise. The only thing you really need to know about is that I stopped the blender a couple of times to just kind of push down in to make sure that those walnuts got ground up. I could hear the blender kind of working at that. You want this pureed so that you really have a pasty kind of something. It's like a very thick sauce. Now, here is a suggestion that you freeze pesto in little cubes. I have a little ice cube tray here. Let the pesto freeze up to the point, solidly basically, so that you can pop them out of the container and then store the cubes in a Ziploc bag or some kind of a storage container that you keep in your freezer. Why do it like this? Because there is potent flavor in these little cubes. And you can just smell it. You can just smell it. So it doesn't take a lot of pesto to make a difference. And you might want just a little bit of pesto to make a sauce for omelets. You might want to drop a couple cubes into a soup that you're making, or even just 1 cube. And if you've got a big container of pesto, you're not going to do that. And it's not something that you can freeze in a big container and then chip out. It's very difficult to do. Once it's frozen, it's frozen. So this is just a really practical way to freeze it and store it and then use it. Use it in soups, use it on your vegetables, use it to sauce almost anything, over top of a baked potato in the wintertime. It's like summer is back again. It's just a wonderful addition to any kind of pasta, as the Italians have taught us well. And any kind of soup or vegetable soups are just so rich. You can add a lot to a vegetable soup and then sprinkle more cheese on the top. And it's a very satisfying stew in the wintertime. You'll just believe that summer has returned. So, there we are. Pesto, remember, use tender green leaves, no flower heads, no sticks. Keep your plants pruned back. You'll have plenty of tender green leaves, plenty of little green cubes in your freezer. You'll be so glad you do come November. Trust me. Thanks for stopping by.